Imagine a world where humans could soar through the skies like birds. This dream was ancient. It lived in myths and legends. People watched eagles circle overhead. They yearned for that freedom. For centuries, it remained just that, a dream. Many believed it was impossible, a defiance of nature. Yet the desire to fly never truly faded. It persisted in the hearts of visionaries and inventors. This particular dream became reality with the Wright brothers. They would give humanity the gift of wings, a gift that would change the world in ways few could foresee. The path to the sky was not easy. It was littered with failures. Brave individuals had tried. Some had even perished. Leonardo da Vinci sketched flying machines. His ideas were brilliant, but the technology did not yet exist. The materials were too heavy. The power sources were inadequate, or entirely absent. Understanding the principles of flight was a slow process. Many theories were proposed. Many were incorrect. Wilbur and Orville Wright possessed the traits needed to succeed. Their journey to the skies began not in a grand laboratory, but in a humble bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. Wilbur and Orville Wright were brothers. They were close collaborators. Born in the American Midwest, they shared an inventive spirit. Their father, Milton Wright, was a bishop. He encouraged their curiosity. He once brought home a toy helicopter, made of cork and bamboo. Powered by a rubber band, it flew to the ceiling. This small toy sparked a lifelong fascination with flight. The brothers were largely self-taught engineers. They read voraciously. They observed the world keenly. Their bond was a source of strength throughout their endeavors. Before they turned their attention to aviation, they explored other ventures. They started a printing business. They published a local newspaper. Then, in the 1890s, they opened a bicycle shop. The bicycle craze was sweeping the nation. Their business thrived. This work proved to be invaluable. It provided them with funds for their later experiments. It also gave them practical mechanical experience. They learned about lightweight structures. They understood balance. These skills would be directly applicable to building an airplane. Many experimenters before the Wrights had focused on power. They tried to build powerful engines. They hoped to force a machine into the air. Some had achieved brief hops, or uncontrolled glides. Samuel Langley, a prominent scientist, had a well-funded project. His aerodrome attempts ended in failure, plunging into the Potomac River. The problem was not just about lift, or about thrust. The most critical challenge was control, how to steer an aircraft, how to keep it stable in the unpredictable currents of the air. This was the puzzle the Wright brothers set out to solve. The Wrights were keen observers of nature, especially birds. They spent hours watching birds in flight, soaring, turning, landing. They noticed how birds changed the shape of their wings, a slight twist here, a subtle adjustment there. This allowed birds to maintain balance and to maneuver with grace. Wilbur, in particular, was struck by this observation. He realized that an aircraft would need similar capabilities. It needed to be actively controlled by the pilot. Once the Wrights had developed their theories on control, they needed to test them. They started with kites. Then they built gliders. They needed a suitable location for these experiments, a place with specific characteristics. It had to have strong, steady winds. To help with lift, it needed open spaces, free from trees and obstacles. Soft, sandy surfaces were also desirable, to cushion landings. And importantly, they sought a degree of privacy. They wanted to work without the glare of publicity. They wrote to the U.S. Weather Bureau. They inquired about windy locations. The Bureau provided data on various sites along the coast. One place stood out, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. It was a remote, sparsely populated settlement on the Outer Banks, a narrow strip of sand separating the Atlantic Ocean from Albemarle Sound. The winds there were reported to be consistent and strong. The landscape was dominated by sand dunes, some quite tall. These dunes, like Kill Devil Hills, would be ideal for launching gliders. The soft sand would minimize damage in case of crashes. In September 1900, Wilbur Wright first traveled to Kitty Hawk. He found the conditions to be as promised. Section 5. Forging the Flyer, Engineering Against the Odds. The 1903 Wright Flyer was the culmination of years of work. It was not simply a larger version of their gliders. It was a new machine, designed specifically for powered flight. Every component was carefully considered and often custom-made. The brothers faced numerous engineering challenges. They had to build an aircraft that was strong enough to carry an engine and a pilot, yet light enough to achieve lift. They used spruce wood for the frame. It was strong and relatively light. The wings were covered with unbleached muslin fabric, tightly stretched. One of the biggest hurdles was the engine. They needed an engine that was both powerful and lightweight. No such engine existed on the market in 1903. Automobile engines were far too heavy for their purpose, so the Wrights decided to design and build their own. With the help of their skilled mechanic, Charlie Taylor, they constructed a 4-cylinder gasoline engine. It produced about 12 horsepower and weighed around 180 pounds. This was a remarkable achievement in itself. Another critical element was the propellers. At the time, there was no established theory for propeller design. Some thought propellers were like boat screws. This was incorrect. The Wrights realized that a propeller blade was essentially a rotating wing. They applied their aerodynamic knowledge to this problem. After much calculation and experimentation, they designed their own propellers. They were highly efficient, far more so than any others of the era. Section 6, December 17, 1903. Whispers of First Flight. The morning of December 17, 1903 was cold. Bitterly cold. A strong wind swept across the sands. The conditions were far from ideal, but the Wright brothers were determined. Their machine, the Wright Flyer, was ready. They had experienced a setback a few days earlier. Wilbur had won the coin toss for the first attempt. He had oversteered the elevator. The Flyer stalled and hit the sand, but it was a disappointment. Now it was Orville's turn. They laid out the launching rail, a simple track of wooden beams. The Flyer rested on a small wheeled truck. A handful of witnesses were present, mostly men from the local life-saving station, and Johnny Moore, a boy. They helped move the machine. Orville positioned himself on the lower wing. The engine sputtered to life. The propellers whirred. At 10:35 a.m., the Wright Flyer began to move. Wilbur ran alongside, steadying the wingtip. After a run of about 40 feet, the machine lifted into the air. It was an unsteady flight, but it was undeniably flight. The Flyer traveled for 12 seconds. It covered a distance of 120 feet. The landing was gentle. Section 7, More Than a Moment. The meaning of those seconds. 12 seconds. 120 feet. It might seem insignificant, a mere hop, a brief moment suspended above the sand. But the historical weight of those seconds was immense. It was the culmination of centuries of dreaming, years of relentless work. This was not a glider carried by the wind, or a balloon drifting aimlessly. This was a machine, heavier than air, lifting itself, propelled by its own engine, guided by its pilot. It was the precise definition of airplane flight. A threshold had been crossed. A new era had begun. The Wrights understood the significance immediately. They knew they had solved the fundamental problems of flight. Their system of 3-axis control was the key. It allowed the pilot to actively manage the aircraft's motion, to maintain balance against gusts of wind, to steer a deliberate course. The engine they built provided sufficient power. The propellers they designed provided efficient thrust. Section 8, A Skeptical World. The Slow Dawn of Recognition. News of the Wright brothers' success did not spread like wildfire. There were no banner headlines in major newspapers the next day. The event at Kitty Hawk was remote. The witnesses were few. A telegraph message sent by Orville to their father was brief. It contained some inaccuracies due to transmission errors. The local newspaper in Norfolk, Virginia, ran a garbled account. Many established newspapers were wary. They had been fooled before. Claims of flight were not uncommon. Most proved to be exaggerated or false. The scientific community was also largely skeptical. The Wrights themselves were not publicity seekers. They were cautious. They wanted to protect their invention. They focused on refining their aircraft and securing patents. They continued their flight experiments in a field near Dayton. These flights were often made in semi-secrecy. They wanted to perfect their machine before demonstrating it widely. This reserved approach contributed to the slow public awareness. Some who heard rumors dismissed them as fanciful tales. The idea of a practical flying machine was still hard for many to accept. It took several years for the world to fully grasp the magnitude. Section 9, The Legacy Takes Wing, Charting a New Human Course. Those fleeting moments above the Kitty Hawk sands were pivotal. December 17, 1903 marked a profound turning point in human history. The Wright brothers did more than just fly. They unlocked a new dimension for humanity, the dimension of the sky. Their invention was not merely a novelty, it was a catalyst. It set in motion a chain of events that would reshape global society. The principles of flight they uncovered became fundamental. Aerodynamics, propulsion, and control, their insights were foundational. Modern aviation stands firmly on the bedrock they established. The most immediate impact was on transportation. The world suddenly seemed smaller. Distances that once took weeks could now be covered in days, and eventually in hours. Continents became more accessible. Cultures began to connect in ways previously unimaginable. Global trade and commerce expanded. New industries emerged, centered around aircraft manufacturing and air travel and all the supporting services.